Welcome back, everyone. If you've been following along with aviation safety in India, things have taken a pretty dark turn with the recent helicopter crash. We've got a whole stack of news reports about this one. And believe me, this is way more than just your average accident.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a crash that kind of connects to a whole pattern of other incidents and raises some serious questions about safety and how things are being done.
Exactly. I mean, we're talking about an Indian Coast Guard advanced light helicopter, the ALH Dhruv.
The Dhruv.
Yeah, the Dhruv. That went down in Porbandar, Gujarat. Tragically, 3 crew members were lost during a routine training flight, which is awful in itself. But what makes this even more unsettling is that it happened right after a major fleet-wide safety upgrade was supposed to have been completed.
It makes you wonder, especially because those upgrades, the whole reason they were put in place was because of all those previous accidents that also involved the Dhruv. So we have to ask, did those upgrades fail, or is there something like a deeper design flaw that's still there, causing problems?
It's a good question. And it's not just some abstract concern. This crash, the one in January, wasn't even the first one near Porbandar. Back in September 2024, another Dhruv crashed in almost the same area during a medical evacuation mission.
And the thing about that September crash is that the whole Dhruv fleet was grounded so they could do an inspection. I mean, that incident alone kind of shows you there could be some serious systemic issues that investigators are going to have to figure out.
Yeah, it's a horrible irony. The September crash, the helicopter involved, was actually recently celebrated for rescuing 67 people during those terrible floods in Gujarat. Really makes you think about all the pressure these crews are under to perform in really high-stakes situations, even when they might be using equipment that's, maybe not so reliable.
It raises a big question. Are we pushing these helicopters and their crews too far? I mean, are we putting speed and rapid response ahead of safety, especially in these critical rescue missions? These are things we have to really think about as we go deeper into the story.
Okay, so we've got this pattern of crashes, and the latest one happening right after a supposedly comprehensive safety upgrade. So let's talk about the Dhruv itself. What can you tell us about this helicopter? What about its design? And maybe why it's been involved in so many incidents?
Well, the Dhruv was designed and built in India by Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, or HAL. It's supposed to be a multi-role helicopter. It's used by the military and a few civilian operators, too. The program, it actually started way back in the 80s, and the Dhruv's been in service since, I think, 2002.
So it's a big source of national pride for India, showing they can be self-reliant in defense technology. But if it keeps having these problems, doesn't that raise some red flags?
Yeah, it definitely makes things more complicated. The Dhruv it's supposed to be a symbol of, great Indian engineering, but these accidents, especially the ones that happened after they did that safety overhaul, they kind of cast a shadow on how reliable it really is.
Okay, let's get into specifics. What are some of the technical issues that have been linked to these crashes? I know you've mentioned the Dhruv's engine and the transmission system before.
Right. Those are definitely 2 big areas of concern. The Dhruv, it's powered by the Shakti engine, which was co-developed by HAL and a French company called Turbomeca. There have been a lot of concerns about how it performs, especially when you think about the conditions in India. High altitudes, extreme heat.
Right, because India's terrain is so diverse, right?
Yeah.
You have the Himalayas and then the coastline. These helicopters have to operate in all kinds of environments.
Exactly. And that puts a ton of stress on the engine. Like the September crash, remember that happened over the Arabian Sea. So now you have to think about saltwater corrosion on top of everything else. It's a tough problem, and there aren't any easy solutions.
And what about the transmission system? What's going on with that?
Well, there have been quite a few reports about problems with the Dhruv's transmissions, some even saying it's linked to previous accidents. But they often don't give you a lot of details, so it's hard to say how bad it really is. But it definitely makes you think about how transparent they're being.
So we've got this homegrown helicopter. It's got a troubled engine and maybe a faulty transmission system. What has HAL done to fix these issues, especially with all these recent accidents?
Well, like we said, HAL started this big safety upgrade for all the Dhruvs because of those accidents in 2023. It was a huge investment to try to improve the helicopter safety record.
But this January crash happened just when this big upgrade was supposed to be finished. So does that mean there are still problems with the Dhruv's design, like fundamental problems? Or maybe the upgrades didn't fix the main issues?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's too soon to say for sure. But this latest crash, it definitely suggests that there are still some unanswered questions about the ALH Dhruv, like how safe is it really? And can it really do the job it's supposed to do?
Okay, this is a lot to take in already. But there's more to this story than just the technical stuff. You said something earlier about political implications. What did you mean by that?
Well, the Dhruv is more than just a helicopter, right? It represents India's goal to be self-sufficient when it comes to defense technology. These crashes and all these questions about how safe it is, it could have consequences that go way beyond just the aviation world.
You're saying these crashes aren't just a technical problem, they're a political problem too. So this deep dive just got even more complex.
It definitely did. It's something to keep in mind as we look into the next part of this story.
Before we do that, though, I think we should remember that behind all these technical details and political stuff, there are real people who have died. Families are grieving, and a community is in mourning. These are the human costs of these accidents, and we can't forget about them.
Absolutely. It reminds us that aviation safety isn't just about machines and technology, it's about keeping people safe. And in this situation, it seems like there is still a lot of questions that need answers before we can be sure that those lives are being protected.
You're saying that the Dhruv is like this symbol of India's big ambitions. It makes you wonder, how are these crashes affecting their image, on a global level?
Yeah.
Especially since they're trying to sell the Dhruv to other countries.
Oh, that's a really important point. India has been, really pushing the ALH Dhruv as a cheaper alternative to helicopters made by Western companies. They've already made deals with several countries, but these crashes keep happening, especially after they just did all those safety upgrades. It could make other countries hesitant to buy it,
So it's not just national pride, it's about economics and geopolitics too.
Yeah.
If India's reputation in the arms market gets hurt, that would be a big setback for them.
Exactly. And it's not just like a theoretical thing either. We've already seen cases where other countries are worried about the Dhruv's safety record. Remember what happened with Ecuador?
Oh, yeah. What was that again?
Well, they bought, I think, 7 Dhruvs back in 2009, but then they grounded their whole fleet in 2015. They had a bunch of accidents.
Really?
Yeah, and they even canceled their contract with HAL. They specifically said safety was the reason.
Wow, canceling contract. That's huge. I mean, that really shows how concerned they were. Did that whole thing with Ecuador have any big consequences for HAL and India's defense industry?
Yeah, it definitely shook things up. It really hurt the Dhruv's image around the world. People started questioning if HAL could really make a helicopter that was reliable and met international safety standards.
It's easy to get caught up in all the politics and the economic stuff, but we can't forget that real people died in those Ecuadorian crashes too. Those families are dealing with the same grief and loss as the families here in India.
You're absolutely right. We have to remember that every one of these crashes is a tragedy. And it just emphasizes how important it is to have these really thorough and open investigations. It's about accountability, not just to make the technology better, but to protect the people who are putting their lives on the line.
Speaking of investigations, let's go back to the September 2024 crash in India. It's really strange because that same helicopter had just been praised for rescuing all those people during the floods. How can a machine go from being a symbol of hope to being in a fatal accident so quickly?
It's a good reminder of how unpredictable things can be, right? Even a helicopter that has a good track record, one that everyone was celebrating for saving lives, it can still have mechanical problems or run into something unexpected. There are so many things that could go wrong.
Like what? What kind of factors could cause such a sudden shift from, hero to tragedy?
Well, it could be something small, like a sensor that's not working right, or a tiny part that malfunctions, or it could be a bunch of things happening at once, like bad weather making an existing problem worse. And of course, you can't rule out human error, although that's usually the hardest thing to figure out.
So many possibilities. How do investigators even start to unravel something like that?
Well, they have to go through the wreckage really carefully, analyze the flight data recorders, and interview everyone who had anything to do with the helicopter before it crashed. It takes a long time, and it's really meticulous work, but it's super important to understand why it happened and to make sure it doesn't happen again.
This whole deep dive has really shown how complicated aviation safety is. We've seen how the technical stuff, the human element, and even politics all play a role. Honestly, it feels kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, I get it. It can be discouraging to see how many challenges there are. But even small improvements can make a big difference over time.
So where do we go from here? What can we do to make the ALH Dhruv safer and make people trust it again?
Well, I think HAL has to be more transparent. They need to be honest about the Dhruv's safety record and really work with the investigators to figure out what's wrong and how to fix it. Trying to hide problems will just make things worse.
That makes sense. But it's not all on HAL, is it? What about the Indian government and the agencies that regulate aviation?
They play a huge role in making sure the whole aviation industry is safe. They need to set strict safety standards and make sure everyone follows them. They need to do thorough inspections and promote a culture of safety everywhere.
So it's a team effort.
Yeah.
Manufacturers, operators, regulators, even the public. We all have a part to play in making flying safer.
Absolutely. And I think getting the public more involved is really important. When people are more aware of these issues, they're going to demand accountability and push for real change.
You know, we've talked a lot about the technical side in the investigations, but I'm also curious about the pilots and the crew. They're the ones risking their lives every time they fly these helicopters. What can we do to support them and make sure they're safe?
That's a great point. We need to make pilot training a top priority. We need to make sure they have the latest information about the Dhruv and any potential problems it might have. And it's really important to have open communication. Pilots need to feel like they can report any concerns without being afraid of getting in trouble.
It sounds like building that culture of safety is just as important as figuring out the technical stuff. You know, we need to make sure pilots feel like they can speak up. But what about the technology itself? Are there any new advancements that could help reduce these risks and prevent more accidents?
Oh, there's some really cool stuff happening in aviation safety these days, sensors. Well, they're getting so much better. And now they can monitor all the aircraft systems super accurately. I mean, we're talking about getting data in real time so you can spot even the tiniest problems before they become a big deal.
So it's kind of like giving the helicopter a better nervous system that can sense when something's wrong before it goes haywire.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it's not just about detecting problems. You can also use this data to predict when something might fail and then do maintenance before it actually breaks. It's all about being proactive.
That's amazing. So what else is coming up? Any other innovations we should be excited about?
Definitely. We're starting to see autonomous safety features. Like, imagine a system that can automatically dodge a collision if it senses one coming.
Whoa.
Right. And autopilots are getting so good that they can stabilize the helicopter and even land it safely in an emergency.
Wow. It's like something straight out of science fiction. But it also makes me wonder about the role of human pilots in the future.
Yeah.
If technology is getting this good, will we even need them anymore?
That's a big question everyone's talking about right now. These technologies are awesome, and they can make flying way safer, but they can't replace everything a human pilot can do, especially in those really tough, unpredictable situations we were talking about earlier.
So it's all about finding the right balance, using these amazing new technologies, but still understanding that pilots are essential.
Exactly. It's about getting humans and machines to work together, using the best of both to create the safest possible environment for flying.
When you look back at everything we've talked about, the ALH Dhruv, the crashes, the technical stuff, the political pressures, it really shows you that aviation safety is incredibly complicated. It's not just about the mechanics of it all, it's about people, the systems they work in, and a commitment to constantly improving.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's an ongoing process, always striving for the best and never really stopping. We need to learn from our mistakes, use new technologies, and never forget that real lives are on the line.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. Definitely a lot to think about, especially for people who follow aviation safety closely. So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you want our listener to remember from today?
The most important thing is that aviation safety is everyone's responsibility. It's not just on the manufacturers or the regulators or the pilots. It's up to all of us to be informed, to get involved, and to demand the highest safety standards from the aviation industry. That's the only way things will really change.
That's a great point. One last thing for you to think about as you keep learning about this. Think about how we balance the need to respond quickly, especially when lives are at stake, with making sure these aircraft are absolutely safe and reliable. It's a tough question. No easy answers.
Yeah, that's definitely something to ponder. It reminds us that even as we develop new technology and push the limits of what's possible, we can't ever forget about the safety of the people who fly these helicopters and the people who rely on them.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you've learned something new about how complex aviation safety is, the human side of it, and the challenges of innovating while keeping safety as the top priority. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions and keep diving deep.